Welcome to the January 6th meeting of the Barrington Planning Board. Before we start the roll call, just mention that Marcus Catkin will be a full voting member tonight. Scott, could you start the roll call, please?
Catkin here.
Capiello here.
Tessier here. Alan present.
Driscoll here. Also with us, we have Town Planner Ernest Creveling and James Jennison, Zoning Administrator and Building Inspector. Item number 3, proposed zoning amendments, public hearing. I'm going to pitch it to you. Do you have any background you'd like to discuss?
Yeah.
At what point you'll enter?
What's that?
At what point you'll enter? Introduce everyone to your guests.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it fits into what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's all.
All right, so we've got 2 items that are, one is clarifying the definition of the term setback, and the one that Mr. Fougere, Mr. Whitmer, zoning amendment number 7, which is the form-based code portion of the Dove district.
Okay.
So, traditionally you start with the guests, so
Yeah. Welcome. You want to come up? I want to hold you back.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Ernie, to what degree do you want to give an update on our meeting yesterday and the materials that are before the planning board? I don't want to steal your thunder. Or do you want us to cover that?
okay, so oh my goodness. I think it'd be probably easier to have you just go through and discuss the changes that you made.
Sure.
Because, what I've got, I added a column in case the board wanted it in the table of uses.
Okay.
For them to go through at some point here. And then I've just, we looked at, there's no definition of a service establishment in the zoning ordinance, and, that's one of the heavy uses, obviously, in the Dove district, so we did put together a definition for that.
Perfect.
But that's all for next, I can give you that.
They have a copy of what we sent to you yesterday.
You know what, I think I probably did not, I can go do that really quickly. What's that?
Is that it?
Oh, no, they're not.
Oh, give that to them.
That's
You want to give me, I'll go run copies.
All right, perfect, thank you. While Ernie's getting that, we'll give you an overview. They're not shocking changes, but then you should be able to see where they fit in. Before the holidays, we had some back and forth with your legal counsel. She had made some suggestions of changes. We made some changes. We went back with questions and answers on some changes. We got to a point where probably any remaining changes had to be a discussion. So we had set up a meeting for yesterday. And we met with Jamie and Connor and Ernie and Laura and Mark and I on Zoom. And we went through. I think there were a lot of things about this that make her nervous for a small town, making a big change from like a traditional Euclidean zoning to a form-based code. I think we were able to address a lot of her concerns. We probably will never eliminate all of her concerns because she's there to protect you from yourselves, from anyone who comes before you, from anyone who challenges Jamie and Ernie. But we were able to go through and suggest a series of compromises and changes that are in the version that Ernie's going to get you that we sent yesterday. I think the biggest thing that we learned in that conversation was that there were places where she thought a little bit more of a definitive direction would be helpful. So I'll touch on those. In the guiding principles for the Dove district, one of the things we talked about is if the frontage of the lots on the 2 primary roads in this Dove district, if we're requiring people to have some amount of non-residential within that, she wanted to know how much. Like, how do you relate to that? How much of the frontage? And the fear, I think, that we talked about as we were poking holes in this was, what if somebody comes and just puts an ATM and says, there's my non-residential? That was the fear. So we looked at a bunch of different ordinances. A lot of the form-based codes are more urban places. So they have a higher percentage of that frontage of the parcel that they would require to be non-residential. Here it seemed like a minimum of 30 to 50%. would kind of hit the mark. That it gives them flexibility. It also gives you space for green space, for some parking on the sides, for access to the back of the lot, that type of thing. Anything I missed on that?
No, I just on that one, we were going back and forth on, we've had a lot of discussions about concerns about that. What the town didn't want is just a residential development here with no commercial. And how can we encourage commercial, and is it viable, and how much space is going to be there? So this was sort of a compromise, is 30 to 50%. Another idea we kicked around is requiring a percentage, a specific percentage of commercial space per development. I think this is more flexible. It doesn't, it's not as concrete. And I think it's, as the project rolls out, the viability is going to increase, I think, over time when more people get there. So that's one area we're looking at, is requiring a specific, and that was one of the topics that came up from council was, can you tie it to a specific number, that if they do 50 units, you got to do 10,000 square feet, and that's what your expectation is. So we went back and forth, and that's how we landed with this sort of metric versus something more specific. Set aside an area that's dedicated to commercial use, and as noted further on, is as part of the approval, they're going to have to show what that is in a diagram on a plan, along with the plan of the residential portion of the development.
Yeah, that was one of the other things that was missing that Laura felt would be helpful, is to clarify right in the regs that the commercial or mixed-use structures shall be shown on the proposed plan. So that when you have a development agreement and you're referring to these spaces, like, well, where are they? So
now that doesn't mean, they're speculating what they may have a use, but they may not. So they put something together, and then they can always come back to you and amend it if they find another user that wants to tweak things or change things around.
Yeah.
But at least gives you some confidence and defines where on the property it's going to be and what it might look like, and I think helps.
One of the other things that she mentioned that she didn't like, she just had a hard time with the phrase development program, which we had in here. So we agreed to change it to the proposed development. And then the other thing in here that is an item to discuss tonight. So in here we have that the applicant, as a condition of approval, will work on a development agreement, which we've defined, and she was comfortable with that. They'd work on it with the select board. So basically, the planning board goes through the whole process, and you identify that now, as a condition of approval, they have to put this development agreement in place. And this goes back to a little bit what Rob had shared about some experiences that he'd had in Dover, and then we talked to the Dover staff and saw what they were doing for these. I think Laura doesn't like the idea that all the residential units can be built and that the non-residential may not be built. That's one of the ways I phrase it, right?
Yeah, and I shared the same concern. And just to circle around and make sure, my interpretation of what Laura said mimics, and you guys get both perspectives, is Laura likes a written out zoning ordinance as we have. Everything is defined, and if you meet it, you get it, right? And so this is not that. This is very, very flexible. So in the event of a dispute, it's more difficult, but she ended the conversation with, but I can defend it. It's not a win. Like if something's written in stone, you get one dwelling unit per lot versus whatever, so that's kind of her sticking point as far as a defensible position as a litigator. It's so much easier to do old-fashioned zoning versus this. That being said, it's not a reason to not do it. And so tying back into this, if an applicant comes to me or Ernie and comes into the office and asks the question, well, what can I do there? Based on this, it's hard to give anybody any ideas. So I said, I think there's got to be a commercial component, a factor, some factoring number that says, based on DS loading, you can get 100 houses square footage wise or per unit wise. What are we going to ask for commercial space? And that's where they were commenting on that plan would show an outline, if you will, or more, depending on what the board wants or the applicant's proposing, is where would that commercial space be and how much would it be? And that's the dedicated, because if you get to the point and you say, okay, well, we're going to set aside loading for something, but then you've built out all this residential and there's no loading left because you didn't say there was going to be a restaurant or a microbrewery or X, Y, or Z. What did you set aside for? So a proposed plan to say we're going to set aside a 20-seat cafe and a hair salon and X, Y, and Z. And this is where it would go if we get to that point. Is kind of what I was looking at. So Ernie came up with some numbers, and the board will have to look at them and decide, 20% of residential, 20% commercial to residential, so, for every 1,000 square feet of residential, you'd have 200 square feet of commercial, something to that. We looked at a couple different towns that used something like that. But without scaring away one or the other, but, obviously we're doing this for the commercial component. So I think it makes sense to give an indicator to the applicant that there is a commercial component. We're not going to say, yeah, we're a residential board right now, and we're going to let you just max it out with, buildings. And then we'll see what happens later. So I think it's smart, to have that component, and the board will have to decide on that.
Yep. And the other related piece here was, because Laura's concerned that we'll make Mark the developer, not Rob. Mark comes in, he gets approval for X number of residential units, and then he's shown in the frontage where he'll build those commercial units later on. He builds his residential and decides he doesn't want to build the commercial. So she liked the idea of tying, allowing the first half or so, whatever the figure is, of the residential to be built, and then you can't get the certificates of occupancy for the second half or the second third or whatever until you've at least built out the commercial. I know we talked about that with you guys before. I think there were some folks that weren't in favor of that, but we did flag it. You'll see it's on page 2 of tonight's draft, just as a question. Like, if that's something you wanted to put in there, you could.
And so the question for the board is, do you want one method? Do you want options for methods that you put in, for example, a 50%, a 20? So every development might be different, and we're talking about one specific parcel here, but looking forward to the future, or, Rob decides to sell tomorrow and it's Chinberg or somebody else, we kind of know the relationship you feel like you might be getting into if this passes, but you don't know for sure tomorrow. So saying for this parcel, it makes sense to build 60%, and then you got to do all your commercial, and then we'll let you have the rest of the rent. Another parcel, it may not make any sense at all. There's a very small residential component, and commercial is the big piece of that parcel. So to leave examples as opposed to specifics is one option, or list out several criteria, or if you know what you want, if you want it to be a 50%, then you can put that in there. But having some guiding guardrails for applicants and staff, and the board when it comes to that point and they say, no, we got DES density for 100 units and we don't want to build any commercial ever. Will you say yes? Who knows, depending on the board makeup at the time. But this leaves that possibility open for future boards to say, yeah, commercial's not working, we don't need it, we don't want to, we've shifted gears, go ahead and build all residential. And maybe down the road, this little corner over here that Holy Rosary's got will be the spot. So that's the nice thing about it, gives you the flexibility, but it also might confuse or create, confusion, both for applicants and the board as the makeup may change down the road. Something that I think some thought needs to go into, however you guys decide you think makes the most sense, gives you the most strength and teeth or flexibility, whatever you're looking for at this point. But that was, one of the other, and because like any development now, you could agree to a phased development, but what are those benchmarks going to be and how are you going to implement it in the future? So it's really just coming up with a phased idea, what you think works, what you would be open to give guideline, guidance to.
So in section 5, under the guiding principles, the way the language was written, without any specific set aside criteria, stated that, or states, said agreement, this is relative to the development agreement, Said agreement may include such assurances of tying the issuance of housing certificates of occupancies with the occupancy of commercial space or some other such guarantees as determined appropriate by the planning board. So the way it was written was flexible. If you wanted to tie it, you could. If you didn't want to, you didn't have to. And what the attorney brought up is you may want to put a number out there. So that's what she highlighted.
Where was that written? I can't find
Page 2,
Should be highlighted.
guiding principles for Dove District, section 5,
Yeah.
paragraph 3.
Yep.
You know, and her concern that she raised is, you know, say you go 50%, and that number is enough that a builder feels that he's made whole and made tons of money and walks away from the rest of the thing Ron brought up in the last meeting, you know? There's always that scenario, and then what are you gonna do? You know, so how are you gonna hold their feet to the fire, or, you know, and that's gonna be really, you know, on the boards. I've been, you know, mulling this over in my mind a lot, especially with this particular parcel, where there's multiple owners, right? So you build on one, you encumber somebody else, but then all of a sudden you walk away and you get your residential component. There's a commercial component left on this piece of property, you know, just like the original approval. You know, some of the stuff didn't go through because there was questions about the open space and who was gonna give it up because there was multiple players in there. You know, so those pitfalls may present themselves with elongated timelines. And so that's why sometimes the board's just gonna have to think of it upfront and make sure we put it in writing that, you know, no, this is gonna be built, clear language, so I know to enforce. You know, we have, because I can point out 2 examples of projects that, you know, got planning board approval, and, you know, we lose track of them, and 7 years down the road, they never finished it. And, you know, whether they're in there or not, you know, it's hard, very difficult to track. You know, so we're gonna have to do a better job at that, and the board's gonna have to do kind of the hard work up front to tell us what that is. You know, because, you know, we'll use an example of, you know, the campground on Ayers Lake. You know, that gets subdivided into 3 sections. Technically, they're 3 separate campgrounds because there was no restrictions. There wasn't, hey, this is a house, this is a campground, and this is a campground. It was just, subdivided into 3 parcels. Now there's 3 campgrounds there, technically, and they can do campground stuff on all 3 of them, even though one's got a house, one's got a campground, and one's got 10 cabins on it. You know, there's really no differentiator. So, you know, it's gonna be important for staff and the board when they're looking at these applications coming forward to kind of parse out all these fine details for us. You know, what the desire of the board is.
The
Performance
last,
bonds, is there any possibility of requiring those? No?
didn't
Okay.
seem like it.
You know, you do the 25% or 50% of the housing, but hold on. And you can't walk away because we got some money in our little
Right.
bank, so.
I mean, right now, the way it's written, you know, you would negotiate that at the time of the approval. You know, if you go with what the attorney's saying, it's gonna say specifically, we have to decide on a number tonight, that you want X done, what percentage. And then when you reach that,
Why do we need X? Why can't we say 30 to 50?
well, you can do a range too.
The last thing that we added that made Laura happy, she isn't a big fan of the district sheet, which is a very form-based code thing to do, to have a map. It's your regulating plan, and then the district sheet where you summarize the uses, the dimensional, and there's some redundancy, right? You have your purpose for the district, your purpose statement. Yeah,
This is the district cheat sheet.
yeah. So we,
You know, the 1-page cut sheet, which I was holding my tongue. I look at those and I love it.
I like him too, but
One page.
it was very clear she was not a fan. So what we did to try to help her out was we took the use table and the dimensional standard table, we added them to page 3. And we added a note that if this were to move forward this year, that the 30 to 50% of the property frontage that needs to be non-residential, that should be added to the dimensional standards table. And so that's another thing where everything's within the text and then it's duplicated on the district sheet for ease of use.
And I will bring up one thing as well. You know, through Ernie and I talking, you know, the uses here. I encourage language like possible uses or may include, just because if we're gonna leave the board flexibility, I don't want people to come in and say, I don't want someone to look at it and say, these are the only 4 things you can do here. You know, so Ernie actually, I won't take credit for it, Ernie drew up, you know, an appendix to what Laura would like, a traditional, table of uses versus, you know, a more vague table of uses. So if the board likes, we can, you know, refer to table 19, table of uses for the new district. And so the board would have to look through these to make sure they agree with those table of uses, you know, X amount add as they see fit. And that's where this came from, because one of them is service, you know, it just says retail service. I'm like, okay, so what's service? You know, if someone comes in and wants a, you know, a car detailing business or, you know, a body shop, we really don't want that there. You know, so let's define service. So Ernie came up with a better definition of service that would go into definitions if the board agrees and doesn't have changes. So those are the 2 things for me for clarity that I really kind of liked was, you know, some language, loose language about possible uses maybe. And then the other component that I don't know if I mentioned already, I had one was like the civic portion. It's blank on the cut sheet. Does the board want to say may require a civic space? You know, I was thinking about, you know, no development in particular, but what if they propose, you know, a nice condo building, and then you're like, okay, so where do the dogs go to the bathroom? You know, this would be an ideal spot for you to have a playground, you know, an internal playground for the kids. You know, we think we really need one because this density went from 23 to 160 or 800. I don't know, you know, the numbers, but let's, you know, use crazy numbers or other parcels that may come in the future. You know, do you want to leave the ability to say, this, you know what, this one needs its own playground. You know, you're gonna have all these apartment buildings, no parking, you know, you're gonna have dogs, there's no, yeah, there's woods everywhere, but if we go into the bathroom in people's woods, are we gonna have, let's put them in a dog park. You know, so I think creative, you know, a nice built design, those are the tools that the board can use to say, you know, let's throw this in here on this one because it makes sense, you know.
I think the only other thing I'd add from our conversation yesterday was Laura's very concerned about the timeline.
Yes.
I mean, you all know you're kind of near the end of this municipal timeline that you're given to get to town meeting, and whether you decide to take things forward as they are with changes this year or hold off, it's really up to the planning board. But I think we have to leave tonight with pretty clear direction.
Right, I'd have to have this all posted, and final proposal is Thursday. Which is fine, I mean, we've done it before, like, as long as we have the guidance, we can do it.
So that would be Thursday, posting Thursday for a January 20th.
January 20th,
There's no time for a meeting.
not in between, only after. But not much time after, because the deliberates, right?
31st,
Yeah.
yep.
It is the
It
31st.
has to be to the clerk has to get it at a certain date too, right?
Yeah.
Everything has to be wrapped up, early February. It has to get to the clerk.
What's the
Yeah, for
26th
the-
was the last,
Was it January 26th?
so for.
Everything's got to be wrapped up in January.
That last week,
Okay.
beginning of February, last week of January is.
What's your perspective on this? Is this, it's clearly a risk. Is this a risk worth taking for us as a town?
You know, you've got some momentum going, and I think, you know, you are working with a place as long as the guy's not gonna sell it tomorrow. So, it's,
Can we have that in writing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you're almost there. I think, you know, if we just take some time tonight and talk through, and feel comfortable enough. I mean, I think, most everybody here thinks it can happen. I just, you know, Jamie's concerns, I think it's, you know, been addressed as far as the table of uses are concerned, and, but what about the numerical basis? I know you talked while I was out trying to put this off, sorry about that, filter. But you talked about the reservation on the lots fronting.
Mhm.
So, and that's the only number that you got attached to the.
Yeah, we didn't get into specifics, and, you know, I've been doing this a long time, and zoning, you know, I could get 5 people into a room and there'd be 5 different opinions
Or
on,
more.
or more on what something might say, and not to give these guys more work than they need. But, you know, you could pick this thing apart for the next year. There's been a lot of momentum with this. You had the home day, which I thought, you know, was an excellent preview, a lot of public input. It's something that you've been talking about for 10 plus years. Nothing's perfect. I can tell you that from writing these things for 30 plus years. If things don't work or you need to tweak it, it's written in granite. It can be fixed next year. There is waiver provisions in here for dimensional and uses to give the board flexibility if something comes up, as Jamie said, that wasn't thought of. I mean, it's our suggestion that, you know, let's go for it. You know, nothing's perfect. And that's one of the reasons you limited it to 1/4 of the square instead of the entire district. So it's a test case.
Only 92 acres of the whole town, so it's, of those 10 lots.
It's
That's it.
Puts in perspective.
yeah. So I think, you know,
How come, you know,
as outsiders,
badly
I
can we
think,
screw
you
things
know,
up,
we
right?
try to clean it up the best way we can, get it posted and put on the ballot.
And what would you say if you could give 2 or 3 cases for reasons why the town should approve this? What would you say those are? Distilling this down to its essence.
I think it implements an idea that's been floated for years, that brings it to reality. You know, the language that's been in the books now just doesn't work, and the proof is in the pudding. It's this too cumbersome. I mean, the idea is great. It's just the implementation was jagged, unfortunately. And I think this provides a pathway to hopefully, you know, lead to a vision that the community's wanted for a long time.
I think too, it's uncomfortable, right? Having been a planning board member and having sat through these conversations where a town goes from conventional zoning to form-based for a district, you're stepping into the unknown. It's a really different beast, and all these concerns come up. Many of them can be addressed. Some of them will just come with time and experience. But the towns that have taken the step have enjoyed having this as a tool. It's been a better way to get the end product that they want. But it is uncomfortable. It will take some continued discussion and education, both with you guys and with the applicants.
So it's less constricting, meaning we're more likely to be able to agree with the developer on something that we like. But there's just risk because it depends on that agreement being able to be generated.
You're also requiring a lot of things that you don't require now. Like you're having there be a percentage of non-residential. You're having buildings be in specific locations and at specific minimum height. So, you know, there are some things in there that are going to give you that more, the pattern that you're talking about. You also do still have some HOP funds. You haven't expended all your HOP funds. So one of the things we talked about, it was unfortunate that Laura, your town council, you couldn't really bring her in till late in the game. We had something to show her. I think having her involved a little bit more, even if this was approved, having her involved in a work session, being able to do some work sessions with you guys and do some outreach to developers aside from Rob about how this is going to work could make you all more comfortable with it. It could also uncover some things that are minor changes you want to make next year. So it doesn't have to be when you vote on it, if approved, it's done and you just have to live with it. It can continue to be molded.
Right. And so over time, next year, we do something successful, it would be at that time we'd say, do we want to expand it out? How do we optimize?
Yeah, this is a test case, this the area, and if it doesn't work, then you go to plan B, but if it does, it's like, oh, well, let's look at expanding it, and then you decide where, or not.
And maybe it's not next year. Maybe you need a couple of years.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'll add, I mean, so realistically, the biggest pitfall is the density increase in a snap of a fingers, really, right? So that, you know, we're talking about specific parcels that the day before, you know, had 23 residential units proposed on it, and now that number is going to multiply tenfold. I mean, realistically, when you're looking at DES loading. And the hope is that, you know, so that's the biggest negative, I think, from a rural town culture perspective. But at that same time, it fits in what the master plan, the walkable downtown that's going to bring business. And it's been a common phrase from planning perspective since I've been involved is that density brings commercial. So to meet that desire for some commercial space, you've got to hit that threshold for density, and to hit that threshold for density, it's got to be profitable for the developers. And so instead of straight up zoning, which produced the 80 units behind Irving, the hope is that this form-based code takes those 80 units that you're going to get again and just allows you some flexibility to kind of, throw it in the salad tosser and say, no, this is what it's going to look like. It's not going to look like 80 units stacked up on a road. It's going to be a mix. It's going to be some of this. It's going to be some of that. So the pros and cons, that's the thing. The payoff is massive increase in density, for the hope that a better looking development than a straight up by right, 4-unit townhouse, condo complex, whatever, is the trade-off with limited density based on, a written zoning. So I think, the pitfall is there's going to be backlash. People will like the outcome if it comes and when it comes, but there's going to be the backlash from, you guys are letting them do this type stuff, that always comes with a zoning change. But I think it also, from a common sense perspective, where this board had just passed 3-acre zoning on some of it, and then they have a higher density at the town center, I think it makes a cohesive thought in the end, as opposed to why'd you do this? Well, we did this because of this. We know we're going to have density in here because we want business to come to the town center. And so, yeah, we're going to keep this rolling. We took those steps to make sure that was implemented. And now we're going to do this. But people are still going to talk and do what they do, and not everyone's going to like it. And there's no guarantee what those businesses will be. Someday, hopefully, they're what you want. But until then, they're just placeholders or empty buildings or, another, attorney or doctor's office or something that, few people use. But it's the placeholder. And eventually, when I think of a perfect scenario, it's, the soiree and everybody out there has decorated their houses, and now it's the Christmas walk through this is the place to go. And it's all that little stuff. And it brings that Christmas village to life, hopefully, no guarantees, but, so we keep selling the story to the developer and hope, he hears it and, and it just, hope it comes to fruition, and there's, nice trees in the middle and someone puts lights in them, when it comes to season and all that stuff, you just, that's what you hope for. And I think it's difficult and hard to do with straight up zoning, as you saw with the 80 units, and the knee jerk to that was, so change that the next year. We don't want that much. And then you come back and revisit it again with another bite at the apple. Now, could backfire. I be completely honest, that, after this is done, you may look at and say, oh, this is just another 80-unit condo thing that, it won't look like that, but it might be something you don't like. There's always that possibility. So you can't write a perfect ordinance. You can't, predict the future. You can't make it happen. You can only take steps to try to lay out the groundwork for them to follow and hope that it comes in the end. But.
And the risk of doing nothing is we likely won't get what we want.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you take the original development that's approved, and if they built that out, you're going to have potentially a bank up front, another mixed-use structure with apartments above and whatever goes in the bottom, and then you're going to have the houses out back. Down the road, zoning changes, they got some infill, Christmas Dove redevelops and does different storefronts and apartments up above, all those things could happen in a prolonged time frame, and 10 years down the road, this turns out to be the same because little changes and infill and stuff like that. This is more of a, we're in an economy where money's good. Developers have an appetite, they can make the money back, so it's kind of like, all the ingredients are there to make the soup. We just don't know if the cook's any good.
mean, if I,
You know?
if I'm not mistaken, the project that got approved, hasn't been built was, that density from ZBA. So, similar to an ordinance I just wrote for the town of Milford, instead of having the ZBA drive the bus, this zoning has the planning board drive the bus, which is where I think it should be. I think it's much better outcomes.
I feel like it's more pressure on the planning board because we have to really know this and work with it. But I also think it's pretty
I
exciting.
think there's also been a evolution, a stepwise progression through this that we've all been through. And I think having somebody try to come in new and not really been part of that is sort of going to miss out because there's been a lot of socialization talking as we went around. I think that's important. It's going to be hard to maintain as we get new board members on here.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you where I agree and disagree. I think, you said the vision, the plan is good. I frankly disagree with that. I think the idea we're going to get, commercial downtown, all that kind of stuff, I'm highly skeptical of that. And I criticize mixed use development most of the time been on the board. It hasn't accomplished anything. That said, if that's the town vision, that's the master plan, I think we got to do the best we can to try to achieve that. I think this is a better way to achieve that. So, I mean, I would relook at the vision of the master plan. I don't think it's very realistic. But that said, it is, the town voted on it. The town agrees with it. This is a good way to get there, the best way to get there, I think. It's better than what we have. Mixed use development has not worked. So if we're going to take, before we walk away from the vision of the master plan, I think we should take our best shot. And I think this represents our best shot, better than what we have now. So.
One other thing I couldn't get Laura to give it. Have you experienced, and what if not, in a hypothetical situation, the applicant comes to the board and the applicant never come to an agreement and it ends up being a no? How have you seen that dealt with? Is it,
I think how that works out.
Yeah, right.
That's a really open question, Jamie.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a conditional use permit process. If a developer doesn't come into the planning board with his eyes wide open or her eyes out open, then shame on them. I mean, it's pretty clear what you want here. Spelled out. You come in with a design review, you have a conversation.
Yep.
There's a lot of flexibility in here. That's the board drives. And if the applicant doesn't like it, well,
and that's what I want the board to hear,
it's
not just for me.
that's what the town wants. That's our vision. Go to Dover.
Yeah.
Or go somewhere else, Rochester.
Well, the other point, the counterpoint of that is where we have the traditional, ordinances, we're going to court, so having traditional ones doesn't keep you out of trouble.
It's true. No, it's true. And I think you're fortunate. If you were a small rural town that didn't have professional staff, I'd be nervous about you taking the leap because it could be a totally different board next year. You have professional staff. You have people who are thinking about this, that are used to dealing with applicants. I also think if you were to leverage this HOP funding, then we can brainstorm together what's most helpful. But not everybody's gonna be able to read the ordinance and understand the vision, even though it's spelled out. Is there another way that doesn't have to be legalese that can say, this is what Barrington's doing? And maybe it institutionalizes some of that socialization you're talking about. It's a little guidebook. It's a little something that when somebody comes in, Jamie and Ernie can say, read this first, and then look at this ordinance, and then we'll talk to you. So you have a lot of options. You can decide, and I appreciate what Ron said, like, at least you're taking a step to try it, see if you can get it to work, and you can make changes. You can also, if the vision of the town changes later, because nothing ever happens, you have the right to revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not confident it'll work, but I'm more confident it'll work than what we have now. So it's a step in the right direction, I think.
And I just want to touch on one other thing, just, full transparency so the board understands, what we talked about with Laura was one of the things, it is a conditional use process. There is a mechanism, well, there's always a mechanism, but an applicant can go get relief from a criteria for the CUP that they can't meet from the zoning board, but they couldn't get an appeal to a CUP that you guys deny. You know, so when we get to that point with an applicant and, you know, the comment's been made, well, the ZBA lets them do it. You know, I just want, you know, so when you get that conditional use criteria, you know, you're gonna have those things, you know, not detrimental, X, Y, and Z. If there's something in there that's like a use, say they go, you know, and
Before you go there, Jamie, aren't we bumping the conditional use for the zoning board? Isn't that one of our new things? Conditional use, aren't we, isn't that one of the new amendments?
No, I think that was, I think that was just a clarification that they can't appeal your conditional use denial, but they can go get relief from the zoning board. You know, I think that was just clarifying that. So Laura just wanted me to pointed that out. I want to express that to the board so they know that if there's something in that conditional use that somebody identifies that they're not going to be able to meet. You know, most of them are subjective and it's, you know, detrimental to the neighborhood type stuff, you know, they're not gonna go and say, you know, a smokestack or whatever, I don't know. But they could, and I just want you to know that they could go get relief from a criteria in the conditional use permit from the ZBA before they come to the board and get a denial. If they get a denial from the board, then they'd have to go to court like we've discussed on conditional use stuff, so.
So this is an innovative land use control? Okay, we're defining all of that now. It's one of our amendments, so.
That's why I want to bring it up.
Gives a lot of control to the board that the ZBA can't get involved in.
So how do we plan on communicating this to voters? Any idea? Have you considered, how do we plan to communicate this to voters so they understand? It's a very complex topic and.
And that, maybe a one-pager communications.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in an effort for time and to not keep everybody here all night, you know, I think that's super important. And we can work on that but knowing that you're going to put this in front of voters first is probably, you know, so running down some of these changes, agree or disagree, and then know you're going to go forward and then pick up your conversation for sure.
We're here for the new subdivision regulation, the conservation subdivision, right? It was also very complicated. I think we'd do it the same way.
Yeah.
Where there's a thing and there's a description, you know, a reference note that this is the whole thing. So I think it'd be the same way.
This is an AI response, one paragraph. Form-based zoning focuses on the physical form, shape, scale, streetscape of buildings to create walkable, mixed-use places, unlike conventional zoning, that separates uses, residential versus commercial, and prioritizes preventing negative impacts, often leading to sprawl and car dependency. Form-based zoning encourages diverse housing, smaller businesses, and vibrant public realm by regulating building placement and design relative to the street, allowing flexibility for varied uses within a defined form.
I would also add that to me, what's important is we see this as a better way to meet the town vision master plan.
Right, that always works, yeah.
That was going to be the opening statement.
Yeah.
In an effort to meet the master plan and the goals, you know, to have a walkable downtown, you know, we're hoping to implement, you know, new zoning changes that would affect that.
Yeah, I think-
So what pieces do we need to get?
Well, I think we got to talk about, one, commercial to residential ratio, number, something.
Yep.
Yes, no, maybe, you know, if you want it.
Well, I would start with number 5, you know, with what we've written is a minimum of 30 to 50% of the commercial frontage shall be, property frontage should be dedicated to commercial uses. So that was sort of
He's
our.
saying a secondary number.
Yeah, I'm saying how much, so you're saying frontage on 9, you wouldn't want the frontage of that to be an apartment building. You'd want it to be a commercial.
You want
space.
30 to 50%.
Non-residential.
So the language we've changed from the language the board saw an hour ago. We've added a provision that 30 to 50% of the frontage has to be encumbered by commercial development. So that was our idea to help mandate commercial set aside
At the front of the parcel.
at the front of the parcel.
But
So
I think part of what you're talking about is if you have X number of total square feet for the lot, is there 5%?
You get 100 dwelling units or 10,000 square feet of living space, how much commercial are they producing?
well, that's a separate metric.
Right.
And so that's why, if they have 100 feet of frontage on Route 9, and they got 10-foot setbacks, and they got 80 feet to use, let's say, You're saying
If they
that
are.
50% of the ADT's gotta be commercial space, and then they could have,
We're saying 30 to 50 minimum, so we're giving a range.
yeah, and so I'm just trying.
Because some of the parcels are really big.
What that would, yeah, but they don't, none of them have frontage on nine.
No, but they
Doesn't have to be
might, they
nine.
might on Community
Oh, I thought
Way.
Community Way as well.
It's Community Way as
My
well.
bad.
Yeah.
I like that. No, I know community way, okay.
So I wouldn't, that sheet you're getting right now, I wouldn't try to bring that up into here now. That might be one of the things you look at over the course of the next year.
Which one's that?
Oh, this, the
FAR.
floor area ratio
Oh.
piece that you were starting to talk about.
Right.
Because I just think that, you know, you get bogged down in that tonight, that just, you don't need to do that. I think they've taken care of it, you know, initially with this frontage, set aside, and, I would look
Well-
at, Mark, go ahead.
Well, I mean, if you have X amount of frontage, it doesn't say the building's gotta be anything of size. I mean, it could be a 2,000 square foot building on your frontage, and then right behind it, because it's setbacks and lot line type, then you put your residential right there. You know, I don't think that, I think that's less important that, I think you should have commercial on your frontage, but I think that doesn't say you've gotta have any amount of commercial other than frontage. It could be a narrow building
Right.
in in concept, you know, with very little commercial space because you need it on your frontage, and then we're just gonna stop piling residential behind it.
But you have to have a plan, Jamie.
Sure.
That's part of your application that shows the commercial space. So it's not just land.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's in here.
Yeah, so I think, okay, so I guess, so does the board agree that frontage on 9 and
Community Way.
Community Way, 30 to 50?
And showing the buildings on the plan so they're not 4 feet deep.
Yeah, but 30 to 50% of the frontage needs to be commercial space.
Right.
On the first floor or any
Well,
floor.
let's I mean, I think that needs to be clarified to Jamie's point. I think I would take a minimum, just say 30 to 50%. I'm okay with the range.
Okay.
But what does that apply to? You know, the linear footage or the square footage? You know, what's the metric there? So I would add square footage, for example, or something that ties that. When you say 30 to 50 of the,
Property frontage.
The reason for minimum is you may have you might have a lot where you could do 75% of the frontage as non-residential.
what is the front, my question is, what is the frontage? You know, is it 50, is it the measuring it this way, or am I measuring square footage of the whole structure?
It's the front of the parcel as it hits the road.
So you're not gonna.
That's a defined term.
Residential to be 50% of the frontage.
Right. You have to have non-residential for at least 30 to 50% of the
But
frontage.
why have a range for a minimum? Why wouldn't the minimum?
Because
be
some of the
something-
parcels are really big and some are really small, frontage wise. So if you say it has to be 50%, and I don't know the frontage of some of Rob's, but you could be talking about a lot more square footage than we can make work.
That back
That we
lot's
know it
huge.
has a market, you
Okay.
know? And maybe that's a site where the daycare, which has some frontage, but is a deeper building and has green space for playgrounds and stuff, makes sense, and it gives them the flexibility to do that. So we can't envision everything. We're trying to provide some direction, but not tie everybody's hands or make it ridiculous for you later.
Can you add daycare to the service? It's not in here. Be good to have
Yeah,
that.
we'll get to that with the table of uses if you think that's a better idea. But like, you know, and I'm trying to bring this up here if this helps.
Okay, I'd like to stick with this point for 1 second. to
Yes,
finish this point.
I'm not leaving this one yet. I'm
Um,
gonna say like parcel 3 has no frontage on any road until, until. Make sure I'm in the right spot. But like parcel 3 there has no frontage on either unless they extend Community Way. You know, and you wouldn't want commercial back there realistically, unless this evolves and that becomes more of a thoroughfare. So that's why I think to some of the things it's 30 to 50, if you've got 1,000 feet of frontage, you know, do you want more? Do you need more? You know, that's where the minimum, and that's where the board has the authority to say, no, this one, you know, let's move this up to the road, looks better and access and things like that.
I think I was thinking of it differently, and that's why I'm coming back to this. To me, if you're talking about just the frontage.
Yeah.
Where I can put residential above it.
Yeah.
I think to me, at least 50%. I mean, now I'm coming around to saying, should be at least 50%. I mean, if you got, you know, a whole structure there, half of it on the ground level is residential, everything above it's residential, then 30% to me seems way too low.
I think adding in here, Ron, the 30 to 50% of the property frontage devoted to first floor commercial uses. Because we don't mention, you know,
I
it's,
mean,
it's
I
the
think
minimum, it's the minimum, they
Effectively,
could
that's what
go,
you're doing, though, you're talking about
right,
the frontage anyway, so it is the first floor, right?
okay.
Or is it? How are you defining it, I guess?
Well,
That's my question.
you want to add that, the
I
first
think we
floor?
could clarify it here.
I'm having a problem with we're trying to drive commercial and we get this 3-story structure and 30% of one corner of it on the first floor is commercial and all the rest is residential.
Well, picture it a different way. Picture you have a parcel, like one of the parcels Jamie's showing, like two, the bank parcel, right, is two? And they put a building that takes up 30% of the frontage along 9. But they have a driveway, they have a green space, they may have a little parking on the side, like there may be other things in that frontage. The building may only be 30%, and it may have residential above, it may have no residential to the side.
Yeah, they only have like 125 feet of frontage right there.
I mean, I just,
39 to.
we're trying to drive commercial down in this space and I think 30% of the first floor of a 3-story structure does not seem to me.
It's not 30% of the first floor, it's 30% of the property frontage, the whole width of the property.
Of the whole width of the property.
Right.
But that being said, to Ron's point, what you said earlier,
Yeah.
30% of it could be commercial, and then 20% of it residential first floor living.
Or more.
Or more.
30
Or
is
no,
70,
70.
and then
Right.
above it's all residential.
Now, take me a minute to wrap my, so say you have 100 feet of frontage. You need 50 feet of commercial, but you could have more residential. It doesn't mean you have to
Right,
build it that
right.
way. It doesn't mean that if you build a 30-foot wide building, that would meet your 30% of 100. But you could say the building, there's enough room, you want to put a 100-foot building there because of setbacks. The rest would be, so.
And you can do it all commercial if you have a market.
But then you got 50 feet of residential on the first floor, commercial on the first floor, 50 feet of residential, and then 2 stories of residential above it.
Right.
I don't think that.
And then we get a huge increase of density out behind it.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The
So,
density is.
so the whole purpose of trying to promote commercial could get eaten up.
Yeah, I mean, remember, I'm not in favor of this objective, but if the objective is to drive commercial, it doesn't seem to me that 30% of the first floor with residential above it is meeting that objective.
It's not 30% of the first floor, it's the frontage of the parcel.
Okay,
if you've
but let's
got
say- let's say they-
300 feet.
Let's say they put one driveway.
Yeah.
So now they got 100 feet, they got 80 feet, and then now you got 30% of, so you got 50 feet and you got 30 feet. Then you get 2 stories above residential. It just doesn't seem to be enough commercial to me.
Well, it depends, I mean, you're going with 100 foot, what if it's 1,000 feet?
Yeah,
It's up to John.
Well, it's up to the board, yeah. You want.
Go ahead, sure.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of one of the advantages of form-based code, right? It kind of gives this chance for collaboration, between planning board and the applicant on things like this that are specific to whichever property. So I would almost leave it kind of open-ended to the board's advantage. To say, as I look at the whole plan, I don't think this meets the I don't know how you word it, you'd have of meeting the commercial objective, right, with this community concept, rather than limiting it to just 30 or 50%. Because if you were to look at, for instance, because it's a community way also. So if we use the bank's parcel as an example, so it would be frontage along Route 9 and frontage along Community Way, right? They would have 30%. That's actually kind of a lot of area that they would need to build out on the first floor without kind of taking into account any kind of rain gardens or any kind of parking or green space that they would put on it. It would kind of force them to build basically all the way along here. So I would think about leaving it open if that's a possibility, to where the board can look at it and say, you know what, this community plan really doesn't meet the objective, and I look at it, that's the advantage of form-based code, rather than kind of limiting yourself to certain metrics.
Yeah, but Rob, if we have a minimum of 30 to 50 and I put 50, then how are we gonna say no? It doesn't meet the objective, but I've done 50, I've made the objective.
I think form-based code allows you to.
Yeah, you can go more, it's a minimum.
And that's the idea. I think I was looking at it backwards, that, you're gonna fill that frontage. They may not choose to based on the design. And so if they don't fill that frontage with anything, because that's future commercial and the residential's going behind, it's kind of just guardrails for, you've gotta have at least 50% of that frontage, occupied by commercial when the commercial goes. I was struggling to see how you mix those, 30 feet, a couple, Roma Joe's, Subway, and then you've got, a little cottage attached to it, and then you got, 2 apartments.
I mean, you're only gonna be able to
Everything's
get,
gonna happen, and when you see that, you're gonna go, yeah, this isn't compatible.
right.
If I meet the minimums, what's Joyce gonna say? When she goes to court?
You say,
Well, no,
unfortunately,
but it's farm-based code, and we as a group can say, no, that doesn't fit the look we
it's
want.
unfortunate, yes, those are the minimums we put in there, but unfortunately, it doesn't meet the guiding principles of this document, and we're gonna ask you to change it.
I mean, the bank property is an interesting one because you have 30, let's say it's 30 to 50% minimum. To Rob's point, he and I come in and we say, okay, we can wrap the corner here and this is what it would look like. But if we could build the same amount, but configure it in the green space where you're having your concerts, not that I'm trying to get rid of that space. If we could configure it differently and meet the same objective, but have it be a better design overall, the board has the right to say, yeah, that works. You're making it a village. You're actually giving us more commercial. You're making it work better. We can allow that. But you're saying at a minimum, you have to do the front.
I guess,
We did the range going down as low to 30, Ron, because, each parcel's different. The ones closer to 9 are more viable from a commercial perspective. And as you go back into the property, that viability goes down.
And they're bigger.
Maybe a daycare can be out back, that's something that's could be viable, but a retailer isn't gonna wanna be at the end of the road, 2,000 feet off of Route 9.
I'm just kind of backtrack. I know I said originally, I'm okay with 30 to 50. Now I'm thinking 50. I'm kind of hard number.
If you're numbered in size.
And you can waive it, so.
That's what I was gonna say, if you wanna put in 50 and then
Right.
know that you can.
You have
waive
that
it, it
ability to
doesn't make
waive it.
sense,
You see the plan, you're like, you know what, 30's fine, or whatever.
Is that okay? I'm a big fan of waivers.
We'll see what we see. We want flexibility, right?
To get what we want, you give him a waiver.
You want to say a minimum of 50% of the frontage for non-residential?
I think the 30 to 50 is fine, but most of the board thinks 50 is, I'm fine with that.
Totally. Where you, Scott?
I'm 30, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I am too,
30 to 50, I'm okay.
I'm okay 30 to 50. But with that being said, if everybody else wanted 50, I'd be fine with 50 because.
Yeah, I would too.
Let me take off my shoe and bang on the table there.
Khrushchev?
Building setback, and then we're talking about this, we're not talking about this front setback is 30 to 50.
That's back from the road.
Right.
Now we're talking across the
And
road.
then there'll be another thing.
We'll add it.
That's it, okay, correct.
So we keep in the range?
I think it's clear.
Okay, it sounds like we're gonna table the idea of percentage of the overall of the development.
I'm against that.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
against it.
You want,
I think there has to be a reference to a commercial component to Ron's 30 to 50. I think that there's gotta be some sort of expectation that, I don't know, whether it's.
Well, the metric I was gonna put out, Jamie,
Yep.
was minimum 5% of the living area of the unit. Example, it's 45 units, 1,100 square feet a unit, 5% would be 2,400.
does that sound based on yours?
About that. No, 5% actually,
Living area, conditioned space, however. That's the way it is.
Yeah. 'Cause I mean,
Living area.
right, I mean, because we have this one, if you take 2 stories of living space, yeah, it was much higher in that scenario.
I think we,
I think our concern was, again, the bigger parcels to the back, where you might have a lot more
we use
units.
20%.
To have them
Which is
do
huge
10
compared
or
to this.
20% might be a large number that we noticed from Mark.
Right, but I envision this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that these won't be developed individually as this parcel's gonna be.
20%.
Those, in the, whether it's through lot line adjustments, just discussion with the board, like the PUD type, you know, we're not planning to put any commercial out back here on this parcel, just because it's a separate parcel and owner. It's all, we're gonna front load it because it's gonna make a better development. Is that how the board interprets it?
I'm thinking, I'm with you, James, I think 5% seems off.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking 10. I was thinking at least 10. 10 would be 4,900.
You could always wait.
Well, that's just it.
You're gonna wanna go higher. I mean, Ernie and I were like 20%, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's-
20% kind of mapped out. You know, this all kind of morphed out of the discussion with, you know, Rob about, you know, just unstacking mixed use. You know, I don't mind doing the commercial, need the residential, but it's gonna be better for me, better to sell, better for the town, if I can unstack that. So using that, you know, that's kind of where my mind gets stuck. We're using that same idea that you can have as much, you know, residential above the commercial, we're just gonna unstack it, then those kind of numbers are the same, you know, and so to me, it's, you know, you're gonna get 2 floors of residential and 1 floor of commercial, so that's where we came up with kind of dropping it down to 20 to give a little bit, you know, a little bit less, you know, and not going, you know, 33%, which is what would be if you did mixed use, you know, so we, you know, we had batted around cutting down to 20, where I think 5 is
Yeah,
certainly low.
talked to Rob briefly, mentioned that over stories, so they use 25%, one of the, so I mean, it's somewhere in the,
Yeah, so like if they're getting 3 stories of living space, obviously that percentage, you know, just a little bit. But I think 1.
I mean, the reason I picked 5 is, you know, the marking analysis noted a potential range of future demand between 19 and 26,000 square feet. So we're not talking about a lot of space here. So at 10%, that's 4,500. That's almost 25% of the demand that he's estimating. So, you know, it doesn't seem like a lot, but we're not talking about a lot either. So
No, I mean, but I
it's
guess
just got to keep that in perspective.
to play this one out real, I mean, do you ever a perspective on what the loading is out there?
I do, yeah, so we have loading, or we have capacity for 115. Roughly, right, that's on a mix of what you show. And 115 units, and then the septic loading design for, is 63. And we haven't maxed out the septic loading, but I would use the 150 is on the outside. That's the max that we, that's not even accounting drainage and everything. I think when you look at that, right, 115, let's say on average, you have 1,100 square feet. You're gonna have some that are 1,500 square feet, some that are 200 square feet. So if we use that example, at least for 2 parcels. That's total. That's right, yeah. So that comes to, so 27,000 square feet, 27,000. 5% you'd have to.
And I mean, just personal town resident, you know, I think the bigger is more and wave it down versus the smaller and try to jack it up. You know, just because the whole idea is the placeholder, but it brings me back to the process. And if Rob, you know, is developing those 2 parcels independently of the Rosary thing, are they doing the trade-offs where I'm going to put the commercial down there because it makes more sense and the residential up here, trade-off stuff? So that, I don't know, you know,
And so that's.
consultant Rob versus developer Rob helping us out, and kind of giving us an eye into what he's planning, it could shoot him in the foot, but it also helps us and him, work this out. Because I think, like you said, at 100, I was trying to brainstorm what could go out there, and base numbers, what are you going to get for units, 100, 1,000, who knows what DES. So having real numbers certainly makes it visually what you're gonna get out there and what you're gonna be working with in the future on those two. Now, there's 3 or 4 other parcels out there that are almost equal in size, so you're considering those numbers again. If those people decide to come in, and do another 100 units, if there's another 2 or 3 parcels that are equal, right?
See, that's the hard part, right? So on our 2 parcels, I know, we're figuring, at least 12,000 square feet of commercial space. Because that's what makes it a village, right? And when we lay it out, it works out well when you're just considering our 2 parcels. The hard part is when you look at our 2 parcels and then you take in to account the Estes parcel, you don't want to necessarily design for the area down below and not leave yourself enough room to build out for the Estes parcel and add more commercial to that spot once those residential units. I don't know how you plan for that on this particular piece, but I know at least on our project we're looking at least 12,000.
Well, that big parcel of 27 acres is really isolated out there, but you don't even see commercial there, do
And
you?
that's the hard part, right? Is if you design for our two parcels
Hmm.
and you'd hate to have a commercial area that's over on the Estes parcel.
Anybody know what's out there? That's the thing,
Well, that's what I was saying, it's more, anything that might be viable is maybe a daycare, but. that's
Yeah,
about it.
right, yeah, right.
Right, so how does this play into that to benefit the town and the developer and all that commercial component, my understanding with the PUD when it was working together, that commercial component would be pulled to the front where it should go, is with this, how do how do they work together after the fact? I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around how it's gonna, work out if they don't come in together.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like everything has to happen the way it states here on the parcel.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's,
the thing,
in looking at Estes property, if they build this all out, commercials in place, everything's going well, and then he comes in and says, I don't want to put commercial out here, and you look at it and say, well, you got to put something, he says, I don't want to, because it doesn't make sense to have anything, that's what the board's going to say, well, shit, we're giving them all this density for nothing in return, but is it the best development? Does it increase, the value and viability of what's, the built environment by adding those houses based on that? So that's the tricky part, going back to what are the potential
It would be a
pitfalls.
big dog park.
Yeah.
There's also a possibility if Rob's project were to move forward, if the project, if Christmas stuff were to be, all of a sudden you have some level of activity.
Right.
You might say, we're good, like, that's our town center. We will see a market for more of it. Maybe the Estes pro.
Yeah, but I think, that, I don't necessarily agree with the town vision, as I said before, the master plan, but I'm driven by that. That's what we're supposed to do. Whether we agree with it or not, that's what the stated goal of the town is, the town. So to me, 90% residential and 10% commercial doesn't really support the town vision or the master plan. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to walk away from the master plan and say we should do, recreational or 55 plus or whatever. I'm fine with going with a different vision, but that's not the vision we got. So I think our plan here has to meet the vision, and 5%, 10% to me doesn't ring the bell.
But to that point, I think you make a great point, Ryan, is say the Estes or any other piece comes into play out there and the commercial component could be, well, do, 55 plus type of, assisted living with a CUP and say, listen, we'll let you have your density out there, but yeah, throw in some assisted living as your commercial component.
As I said, I like that, but would I do it without the town vision or the town master plan changing? Would I vote for that? The answer is probably no. Even though I agree with it, but I think I'm driven, I don't vote based on what I think. I vote what the town thinks and what the rules are. And so unless we had a change in the town vision or master plan, I don't think I could reasonably vote for something like that.
I mean, again, it's supposed to be a mixed use, but you gotta keep in mind that it's not 200,000 square feet of mixed use.
Yeah.
I mean, RKG, again, it's 19 to 26,000 square feet of space. It's not a lot of area.
Right.
And he's talking about half of it, just on his.
Yeah, and, and I hear this,
I mean, I know 5% is not a lot, it's not a big number on, to your point, and I don't disagree, but,
If Essie's is last in line,
it's the last.
and
in
it's
line,
a
but-
drive, just to the center of the parcel, it's a half-mile drive.
and I just want to.
Nobody's gonna be walking, I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't mean, I was just trying to talk out every scenario so we
okay.
all understand
Yeah.
and, why is, wide open, but.
I mean, at that point, you're gonna have a good idea what's happening below, and it doesn't even make sense to have it, and
No.
it's certainly something that you love to do.
We
Get away
waive
from
it.
Or not.
Or not.
I guess I'm just looking at, someone's in town, how does that achieve the vision that we've agreed to, 5% or 10% even? I just don't think it does. I mean,
So
I don't
what
think you
would
answered that question.
recommend?
Well, I
Is
kind of like
it a-
20. I kind of like 20.
Is it 5 to 20%?
I
We
think,
have a range again?
I think you got to support the town vision and the town master
Mhm.
plan.
I agree.
And I think that to me, 20% to me is kind of the minimum. I mean, we kind of require 33% now, as Jamie says. This is a significant reduction from that. How low can we go before we get, a lot of abuse from the town?
Mhm.
We'll probably get abused anyway, but I think, I think 20% is a defensible number anyway. It's not 5.
I mean, so I live in Plymouth Village, downtown Plymouth. If you look at all the residential uses and then our commercial uses, it's 10% commercial. We don't have 20 or 50%. You have all the residential neighborhoods around the downtown or on Main
I
Street.
think I think the support for the town center vision, but you're gonna hear rural a lot more than you're gonna hear a lot more support for rural development in the town than you are for the town center, I think. People are really thinking this is, a bedroom community, all that kind of stuff.
But
So I-
doesn't that mean a smaller percentage of commercial?
Yeah.
Well, I think
I think what the goal is for commercial, like I say, I'm okay walking away from commercial as the vision, but the town has not walked away from that yet. This is a way to get commercial. I think saying, we changed everything, we made it easy, we got 5% commercial, pat us on the back, I ain't seeing that happen.
But if that 5% is 30,000 square feet, it generates 30,000 square feet, that's meeting the vision and the market.
Yeah,
Sure,
And
if
that's
it
it.
is, but,
But aren't you saying 24,000 is the number at 20?
well, yeah, whatever it is, I think 20% to me, then, as a resident and a placeholder, I think 20% and then make it negotiable. I think, for me, my interpretation of feeling is if we did not have, and not to single out any development, if we didn't have condos and apartments going in there as a possible, I think you'd see this board and everybody say 5%. It's fine. If they were single-family homes out there, they were cottages, they were this, they were that. But everybody knows that there's gonna be a mix, and we're not an apartment town, and nobody wants to be. Because you're not building apartments for Barrington residents, you're building apartments for people to come here from somewhere else. And with that, pros and cons, what's that? It just,
So nobody in Barrington wants to live in an apartment.
nobody in Barrington is gonna sell their house at this profit and move into an apartment for $3,700 a month. I don't
You
think.
need to talk to a client of mine that built 290 units in Londonderry, and a large percentage of them are retirees that live in Londonderry.
But how many-
that sold a house and moved to an apartment.
But how many apartments are in London there already?
There's a lot of apartments.
Massive amounts.
Yeah.
But like you look at
He's still
here and
there.
knock on the doors, there's nobody from Barrington renting over here. There's very few people from Barrington renting in Mr. Baldwin's stuff. There are people from other places that want to come to Barrington, and it's a step up into a home, and that's great. But I think if we don't have this placeholder that's a little bit heavy, you're gonna get apartment buildings and renters, and I don't know that's the taste that the town wants. They would rather see a single-family town remain, a bedroom community with some commercial. So I think the compromise is that, we'll weigh heavy on the commercial because we know we're gonna get those apartment buildings that aren't necessarily, the stock that we're used to or want.
Even, yeah, I think there's even a feeling that those people moving in
You're
there.
allowing 28 units.
Well, I know, that's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah,
the
I
trade-off.
But I think even, there's a feeling even the people moving up there are not really with the, the Barrington mode. They're asking when's the trash pickup and stuff like that, which doesn't happen in Barrington, so there's.
You
these
mean the
people-
homes?
Yeah, the homes are there. When's the trash pickup? Well, guess what? We don't have it here in Barrington. So I think if you have apartments, if your apartments roll in, you're gonna have a set of expectations that are not really in sync with what Barrington does. I don't know, I just think the goal is for commercial. I just think the number's gotta be a lot higher for me.
Pick a number. It really has to be a number you guys are comfortable with. It seems like getting it into this
Is
version is
20%
important.
good for everyone?
Okay, 20. Move to 20.
Okay, sure.
You okay?
I was more in the 10% route.
Yeah, okay, then why not?
I mean, but it's negotiable. That's
It's
when the board, you
negotiable,
guys sit here and fight it
We're
out and go
setting a
like, hey,
target.
listen, come on, this is what he wants. It looks great. We love it. But he can't fit 20% commercial. He wants to do 13%. Yeah, and it's gonna be nice because it's over here and we like it. That's where that flexibility comes in, hopefully. And we'll come out with great, developments based on that.
So we're gonna add that to section 5,
Correct.
where it says minimum 30 to 50% of the property frontage and 20%. Jamie, how do you use conditioned space? Do you use living area? How do you define, not including the basement, where people live? It's
Yeah,
heated.
I would say finished space, habitable area. I mean, it's up to
I've
the
heard the
board.
term conditioned, because that's where it's heated.
Yeah, I always waffle that, go into definitions and, okay, well, now I finish up my basement and this and that, but
Well, it's
I would,
conditioned
yeah,
space, it's conditioned space.
right, and so
But I want to use a term that you're used to using.
Right.
I want to use something that's easy for the board at application time, that they see this many dwellings going in and they're going to say, we're going to build 2,000 to 2,500 square foot houses and then get it in that range as opposed to.
In the policy for class private road thing, we use living space or potential living space is what we.
Yeah.
Living space?
Or potential living space.
And it's up to the board, because like I said, I don't want to create a situation where an applicant comes before you, proposes 17 houses, 1,000 to 3,000 square feet, and they put on their thing like a yield plan, 50,000 square feet of living space, and then I get a thing and, okay, well, this one's 5,200 square feet and this one's only 3,500 square feet. Hey, you got to go back and adjust your commercial space because you didn't hit it. So that's where the range is good and the flexibility is good, but, all the little
We're
pit.
not doing a range, Jamie.
No, okay. But all the little pitfalls that I get to think about when they come in for those, to pull those building permits, and that building changes footprint a little bit, because they tweaked it, instead of sending it back to you to say, okay, now you need 200 more square feet of commercial space. That's when I hope for the range. We're basing it on 20%, but then a range of as-built.
How do
How do you do that?
How are you allocating the septic loading in the well capacity?
So they have to, like he did, Rob did, he calculated his overall development potential and then took a percentage of that overall
Living space?
to get, so you take 20% of that
Yeah, but
overall.
if they put in a restaurant, which is one of the things we want,
Right,
that'll be
they're gonna
higher
have-
loading, there'll be
They're gonna
higher
have to show
loading.
you that in their plan.
When the plan comes in, they're gonna have to show the plan for the residential and the commercial
Okay.
with the loading allocated to each. So that's where the rubber meets the road.
Okay.
And they're gonna know, based on test pits, what the loading of the site is. It's gonna be X amount of units, X amount of square feet. If they have an idea for a restaurant, they'll build that into the calculation so that it might not get built right away, but it's there, it's set aside, it's reserved for that use and uses.
Do we have a space in there for reserve loading? That's another one where I kind of lean towards a percentage of total loading set aside for commercial space.
Roman numeral 2.
I'm okay with that, Jim. If they come in with a, all low use, like, I'm gonna put lawyer's office in there, although they are full of shit.
Right, but we, as a resident in a town, you want a restaurant someday, you want a coffee shop, right? You want some of that stuff to go in there. If they don't set aside the loading,
No, what I'm saying is they come in with someone we don't like and say, no, we want you to use a restaurant for loading instead of that.
yeah, okay.
So I like the fact that we can, say, I know you planned for that, but we want you to plan for this instead. So that, we can do that. Okay, that's good.
The next change is, the big change is,
Don't frighten
right
us.
now it says the board may include a tying in the number of COs issued to the commercial space. But there's no specific number, it's not required. The attorney suggested that be measured somehow, 50% and whatever, something. Right now, it's flexible, be negotiated on a case-by-case.
I think it's gonna be, shall include some assurances. Flexible to what they are. damn it. Flexible what they are, but I think there's gotta be some assurance. If you're gonna do the commercial space later, there's gotta be some hammer. Got to be.
Instead of may,
Yeah.
agreement shall include.
Flexibility, what the agreement is, but there's gotta be an agreement up front of what it's gotta be, so of something. COs or something, there's gotta be something. If we allow even 80% residential,
He shall keeps it flexible, mandates it, but keeps it flexible.
yeah, I think shall,
I'm fine
there's
with
gotta be
that.
something. What that is, we can talk about, but it's,
Case-by-case basis.
yeah, it's gotta be something. It's gotta be something.
Well, the next big change is they inserted the table of uses, which is nothing, other dimensions.
Does the board want to insert the table of uses, or do they want to keep it vague with just a couple things?
Again, that's.
I like it.
You can do both though, right? You can insert the table of uses the way we have and then insert your references.
You can just reference it.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was saying. If the board wants the table of uses amended as is or in some other various format, add, take away, do they want a note saying Article 19 or,
Well, the one thing that you pointed out earlier is that there are more uses that are pointed out in there that fit into the subcategories. So if there's any doubt, somebody can go down to the table of uses and say, okay, that's an allowable use, which means that you as a planning board have to go down through there and decide, because I did take some out, and I marked some as,
like agricultural
Yeah.
it could be misconstrued as a garden, but with open space, it could be farming. Where there's that, an open space piece, let's say, but, so the board kind of really has got to run down that list real quick, see if they want to chop anything off there, add anything, that does make sense or doesn't.
So the only thing when you have this table and you actually go through and assign the detailed uses like you guys did for your existing uses, that's following conventional zoning. So it's blending the two.
Yes.
The district sheet uses are simplified, they're broader, and then you have a conditional use permit. So if I come in and I'm service, but I'm not covered here and I want to plead my case, the board can give me a conditional use.
Sure. I'm thinking after the fact approvals, when those businesses change,
Right.
what can go into those spaces without coming back to the board for another conditional use? If the board wants to have that list available, so I can just approve, yeah, this is a service, but kind of a different service, as opposed to everybody comes back to the planning board for a conditional use.
So I guess one of the things I wanted to offer up is you could just strike this use table that we, from the district sheet.
Just,
And just.
just the four things you had?
Just take that out and use this
Town center.
and follow your town set, your dump district.
Yeah.
That's another option, so it's not confusing.
Yeah, and it's up to the board how they want
Well,
to,
I'll tell you, I like this better.
which one?
This one.
Yeah, this one.
So if you want to do that, I would take away the other one we did.
But I would ask the board to run down that list real quick, because that'll have to go into zoning and change, to make sure that they're amicable to everything that Ernie has outlined and tried to,
Do you still allow conditional use permit option for?
Other
use
stuff.
change?
for other stuff that's not in there, yeah, I would think so.
We want to change the language. Yeah, I think.
Right, yeah, everything's on the table for conditional use if it makes sense, but these would be the things that are permitted by right, that if somebody wanted to come in and change a space from, a doctor's office to daycare, I could let them do that without coming back to the board.
I have one question, Ernie.
Yeah.
Why did you have professional, business professional offices permitted and then business professional park conditional?
Want me to take that one?
Yeah.
Because an individual office for a business professional, lawyer, whatever, as opposed to an applicant coming forward and saying, I'm gonna do a business park,
Oh, a park.
a strip park,
Okay.
type of development.
Okay, got it.
So no assisted care, no funeral homes, no gas stations, no convenience stores, no bed and breakfast, no assisted living, no golf courses, no grocery store, no hardware, no healthcare, no hospital, no landscape nursery, no kennel.
But light manufacturing would be allowed there?
Wait, oh, that one probably should come out, huh?
On page 3 or 4, that whole industrial use.
Yeah, when I hear you reading that out, I like yours better because it is more flexible.
That's right, you want to keep moving forward.
Contractors, storage and equipment yards?
We got rid of that.
Oh, okay.
I-
You got rid of that with this.
Those were-
Right now, it's a P.
Yeah, no, did that change, Ernie?
I mean, the advantage of having it limited and
one.
the board has a chance to weigh in on additional uses is you get to weigh in on additional uses first.
But they'll have that and someone can still present an additional use.
Right.
Additional permit.
Yeah, truck terminal.
But-
I say
Yeah,
go
like-
for the
Yeah, what-
simplistic one to start with and come back the
Yeah,
next time
all
with
of,
something.
and
You wanna,
all of the industrial, I mean, none of that belongs there.
yeah, I think
All of
I
them.
think that was a cut and paste.
Warehouses and wholesale uses.
Maybe light manufacturing, maybe, but other than
But
that.
I-
Yeah, no, I would get rid of that
Solar?
whole section,
That whole section
Well,
goes, all right?
Research and development facilities,
the
maybe.
commercial, industrial.
So
What?
light manufacturing and research and development, I would say maybe. Other than the rest, I would say no.
I think you put R&D under some other professional office. I think that opens up a
As
door
you go
to,
down to solar, we're not gonna want somebody to put residential solar, community solar.
well, no, I mean, if he builds a building that's got a surface for it and wants to be solar compatible, I think we should encourage that.
I'm just thinking it would be easier to leave it off.
Okay, leave everything
I'm
on.
just, I don't know.
You don't want to put solar on these things?
No, I'm fine with solar. I'm just saying that it does seem like we're gonna get down in discussions and be held to what's in this permitted list.
But
It's
so,
easier to leave
you know,
it negotiable.
yeah, and for me, so like, anybody builds a 10,000 square foot commercial space and they come in 2 years later and say, I want to put solar on it. They're coming back to the planning board for rooftop solar. It's fine for the board, but it does, it's the fee and the time and this and that, just for something that is, from my perspective, would be ancillary and not, if they want to do ground mount solar and a solar field out there, yeah, certainly I would send them this way, but
I'm just thinking in the interest of time where we are today, rather than going through this, if we just left it sort of nebulous and then next round we come back and firm it up more, we'd have more time to do thoughtful consideration of all this.
Well, I mean, under solar, I think residential community, I would say you definitely want to permit those. And the rest, maybe you could go CP on those, I think, Scott, but the first two, why would you even consider?
I was just going through, looking at all these, thinking
Get a lot of
swimming
people complaining
pools.
about the ground solar behind Caliph.
Yeah, but you,
but they came in for that. And so that's the thing. And I'm fine either way.
they're not doing that downtown, I think.
But the ground mount, the
Be
ground mount
surprised.
came in, but like if there's a single family residential component to this, we're gonna fall into that mixed use problem that I brought up at last meeting is someone out there buys their condo and wants to do something to it. It doesn't fall into that thing. Or if there's single family structures out there and they come in and they want to put solar on the single family structure because it's technically part of this
Could
deal.
we just put a no ground mounted solar? Does that satisfy everybody?
Yeah.
I don't know, do we want to tie ourselves to that?
No, well, I think
Okay with
I think it needs more discussion.
Yeah,
If the board's not up to a full discussion on it, then leave it like Scott said and revisit it. But if you're up to a full discussion, go through each one, I think you gotta look at the solar things and And then you'd have to make that, you'd have to put a footnote in there, this is no ground mount.
I mean, I don't even know what architectural solar is.
How about just making conditional use permit? Just put a C before all those Ps you have a question about.
I think there's gonna be pushback if we say you gotta come to us for permission to put rooftop solar on residential or,
Yeah, maybe the exception of residential, but community is something different.
or community could be, I do the whole building and it's a community.
Well, yeah, I gotta look up,
The system.
you gotta look at the definitions, because I've wanted to bring this up again, but nobody comes in for the other stuff, so I haven't bothered for the other solar stuff, but like community solar has gotta be
Basically,
enough
that's what-
solar to benefit the community, so you like gotta tie it back to the grid and like let the town use it type thing, so.
But they do, residential does it too, it turns the meter backwards. I mean.
But it's for your own personal use, it's like agriculture community, agricultural solar, it's gotta be for the use of the farm.
I think in our,
Rochester.
correct me if I'm wrong, I think in our
Yeah.
definition is how much you produce defines whether it's
If somebody
community or
can
not.
tuck it
So
in
there's a megawatt or
somewhere.
kilowatt number, I think.
It's that and.
I'm just looking at 8 o'clock, and I wonder how long it will take us to actually go through this and think this through, which is why I'm wondering.
You wanna go later?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe it'd be better to
It
come
doesn't get any
back.
easier later, Scott.
Are you
Take your medicine, bitter medicine now.
Okay, I better go
Using
get
the
coffee.
General categories that were provided originally at this point, just because of the time factor.
I think that's what Scott said.
Yeah.
Keep
Yeah.
the short table uses for now. Was that what you said, Scott?
Yeah,
Add in the definition of service.
Yeah, just tweak the service so I know what that means.
adding daycare.
And,
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'd go after it now. I mean, it doesn't give it, it doesn't take any less time later, you know? so
No, it doesn't.
I'd say if it's in front of us now, deal with it now. I'd be aware of that, but I understand. Everyone will start, there's gonna be a short meeting and so it's not. So I understand.
I mean, I think based on what we heard tonight, we can make these changes tomorrow and get them to Ernie. How does that work? Then you and Jamie and Tom can look at it. I don't know if you want to share with the planning board again before you.
They can't vote.
I can't- yeah.
Comment back to them.
You're kind of up to you.
Well, you probably poll members, and where's everybody? I mean, that's probably a good thing to,
It's a one-way conversation.
Yeah, just
You can't talk to each other.
So you say poll.
No, he said now.
Oh, now.
yeah.
And what was the question?
Are we okay moving forward with this, or want to delay it? I think that was,
Delay this.
yeah, delay it or, no, delay the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Well,
do it,
yeah,
or go
I
for-
thought we agreed on that.
We're going forward?
Till the 20th, yeah.
Okay. Is that
We
everyone-
voted on
everyone
the
else?
20th.
Is that where everyone else? Okay.
Is that what we, that's what I thought we were.
well, it's up to the board, the board has the vote. You can dump this at any time, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it. But, like Ron said, make a decision amongst yourselves that this is some, the changes, you're gonna move forward and move to the voters next
We said
meeting.
Post it by Thursday, Friday at the latest.
Yeah.
Right.
So we don't have a lot of time. Meet the statutory posting requirement.
Because you won't be able to make changes after the 20th.
That's right, you can't make any changes,
Right.
The next hearing's basically.
Yeah. That's it.
Moving it to the voters or dump it till next
It'll be
year.
shorter next time, I won't be
so
here.
the more changes we try to throw in now, the more
Going on
potential
tonight
for
for my
error. And, so, I mean, it might, to me, keeping the uses that they've got listed and working on this over the next 12 months is probably the way to go.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
I agree.
But we can do changes on our plain language explanation, right? Does that all have to be set now?
Have you-
If it goes into zoning, you'd have to notice it and post it, that's a
That's the
substantial
voter
change.
guide.
I kinda like
material.
I mean,
Jamie's
somewhere I think we should have a QR code that
Meet the
references the
conversation.
map
Had a pretty good spiel there,
and
I thought.
at least some of this general, because people are gonna be looking for more information.
Yeah, we'll get
Well,
that.
hopefully
What
the
we-
guide will be a lot
But we
more.
just can't change the
Right. So I think what Jamie tried to get us to stop talking about like the outreach stuff because he wanted to make sure we got through this, which we did.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. We can help support you and we can help create the voter guide like you had before for the open space conservation ordinance. So we can do any of that. We can format it. We can help with QR codes and linking things to being online. Once this is in and Ernie knows that it's posted, we can work with staff and we can even have those for your meeting on the 20th so you can review them. And then we can start talking about getting them out in February so that people have something that's
So,
clear.
will you do a one-pager communication
We can.
for the community?
Yep. If you'd like us to, we can.
I mean, I think that would be really helpful.
It's been very helpful and all the towns have been
Oh,
working
yeah.
in to summarize
And you think you
complicated
could have a draft for the 20th
10-page
meeting?
ordinances
Yeah, that'd be
on
great.
one sheet.
Because we can change that draft for the outreach stuff.
Correct.
That doesn't have to be anything. So if they have a draft for the 20th meeting and you want to make some tweaks to it, we'll have time to make those because there's no deadline for that
And
stuff.
some kind of map, even if it's just a little drawing. I mean, people are gonna look at
Well,
the
with a
numbers
QR
on
code,
this.
it can
No, that's fair.
take you to wherever it is.
There is a drawing already.
Yeah, but. Well, maybe, but if they're gonna do a one pager, like,
Yeah.
just somehow figure out, a drawing or numbers.
On the one page, you won't have a map? I think it's probably a
It's
good
on the
idea.
backside.
Okay, I think it's a good idea, actually, yeah.
Yeah, we can work on that.
Because the Dove District is not well-known.
Well, yeah, and when you put all the lot numbers and
Just go
stuff.
back to that piece.
Civic, oh.
It is.
There's one I missed, I apologize, is that, well, we didn't miss, we talked and kind of never got around to the civic portion.
Yeah,
Is there an appetite to say may require civic?
Yes, for me.
I think so.
I just,
Sounds good, keep it there.
There's 100 acres, you may wanna,
yeah.
Yeah.
so just in that civic space, but may be
maybe
required,
required.
you know, it's
And it
not,
may not be.
right, yeah. You know, the whole
How do
idea.
we talk about it?
You know, when this all started, you know, tumbling, you know, the idea was with the purchase across the street, the idea that the Christmas dove is gonna have that pond hopefully open in perpetuity somehow, they'll be preserved at some point. That kind of the civic space is kind of covered, you know, and that was the discussion, but I think,
Hey, you gotta have a place for the geese to go.
exactly, yeah, we have to rehome them.
Then Jamie's pool.
I'll come over and dig the hole. You push them all into it, we'll bury them. But I think it's just, it gives you a little opportunity to say, no, listen, put in a splash pad.
Good?
Splash pad, I'm gonna run over there in my Speedo, you know, every hot summer day.
All right, any more comments? Let these guys go home.
We need to prove, we need to get on the agenda more, right?
Yeah, so the thing you do need to do is to vote, the first article, or the
Right,
first
I
item.
think we gotta do that and open it to public hearing, right? Make a note that we will be returning on to Articles Amendment 7 on the 20th. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all your help.
Fix this one, fix this.
Yeah, thank you.
You don't wanna stay for the rest, you can. Nobody ever does.
That's the first time we're in perfect alignment with me on it.
No, I got, I wanted, everyone gets, you know, the range, something or other.
Oh, yeah, there was one part of it, but for the most part,
Yeah.
the way we're thinking
So
about it.
this going, guys, let's keep going.
Right, so what are we at?
We gotta have a public hearing on Amendment 6. Everybody get their mic on? in
Would
case
this
they wanna comment?
definition be a separate zoning amendment to go into
It would,
definitions?
so I'll-
Let's
I'll
let
have
everybody
to add
settle
it,
down
so,
first.
For the public hearing, so we'll have that, okay.
And just real quick before I move off the subject, that this would be added as a definition change to Article 18 definitions to clarify service, what service establishment means for
Okay.
that,
Good.
general, okay. So he'll notice that one and it'll be a separate thing, you know, we thought we could just loop it into adopting everything, but where it's gotta go into definitions, probably cleaner to do it separately.
And someone mentioned adding daycare to this.
Yeah.
That we can do as part of, that's what he'll have for you on the 20th. You'll approve that. That daycare will be a use, but this kind of better serves its purpose under definitions that I can reference definitions for what a service is. So that would be a definition change.
Okay. We have proposed zoning amendment number 6, clarifying the definition of the term setback. Are you in favor of amendment number 7? To the Barrington zoning ordinance as recommended by the planning board to amend Article 18 definition setback to add, quote, "Where a yard abuts a street or travel way, the setback is the area line between the abutting street or right-of-way line and the furthest projection of any building or structure," close quotes. Adoption of this article ensures the setbacks are applied in all cases where a defined travel way has been or being used to access another's property. I'm going to open this to public comment.
Before you do, I'm
Okay.
assuming there's a typo there, right? it says number 6, and then it says you were in favor of Amendment 7.
Well, you know how that works.
Yeah, that's easy.
Just clarify, just clarify.
Yeah. Thank you.
And why did we not vote on this last time? Laura had to look at it, was that?
We were missing an or.
Oh.
Oh, right.
Okay,
With the,
That-
between a budding street or right of way.
okay.
Okay, so any more comments before I open it to public comment? Open it to public comment on this. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this article? If not, we will close public comment. Anybody out there?
No one's out there.
Okay, I'm closing public comment. Motion to place amendment number 6 on the ballot.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Shepherd, aye.
Cat can I?
Gabriella, aye.
Jesse, right?
Alan, aye.
Just like, okay, that's done. All right. And for the record, do you want us to mention that Article 7 will be looked at on the 20th?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we move zoning amendment number 7, form-based code, to our next meeting on the 20th of January.
Second.
Roll call.
Shepherd, aye.
Cat can I?
Gabriella, aye.
Jesse, right?
Ron?
Sorry, Alan, aye.
That's all right. Usually I'm the one that's,
You buy me.
he's trying to trick me.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so next item, moving on to number 4, review and approval of minutes from December 16th. Any comments or corrections?
I move we approve the meeting minutes as written.
I'll second it.
Shepherd, aye.
Cat can I?
Gabriella, aye.
Jesse, right?
Alan, aye.
Driscoll, aye. Okay. Anything else? New business? Anybody? Motion to adjourn? If not,
I second it.
roll call.
Shepherd, aye.
Cat can I?
Gabriella, aye.
Jesse, right?
Alan, aye.
Driscoll, aye. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Almost done.